Now, as we know, the Prime Minister seems like he's heading for a brick wall when it comes to the upcoming federal election. Why? Because it just doesn't matter what he thinks or what he says about how amazing everything is. The reality is that, as we've told you before, Australia's wealth gap is heading towards its worst inequality since the 1950s. As you've heard multiple times, and we've been talking about it for as long as it's been part of the mix, we're in a per capita recession, meaning that, OK, they are able to find a way to say that the country is ever so slightly growing, but not when it comes to you and I, because, put simply, the wages of most normal people is not matching the cost and increased cost of everything. The only exception is often things when it comes to the public service, which has exploded under this government. More than 30,000 people have been hired by the federal government, and everyone working for the public service, including the politicians, have got pay rises. In the case of the politicians, they have got 3 pay rises since the last election. You and I, obviously not the same. In fact, as the Australian newspaper had on its front page this morning, the graph that we may have quickly flashed at you before, but I want you to see again, this is the overall picture about households. We are going backwards. The costs go up, the income goes down, meaning the deficit gets larger. The one thing that the Prime Minister and his Treasurer have said over and over again that is the proof about their incredible economic management is the document where they don't have to actually count everything that they spend. As we know, there are tens, probably hundreds, of billions of dollars which are off budget, much of the spending that Chris Bowen's been putting in place. And as they're able to get a massive increase in iron ore receipts, as they're able to count the profits of the Future Fund, they've been able to say this for the past couple of years.
The Albanese Labor government has delivered a second consecutive budget surplus.
What we've done is produce a budget surplus and followed it up with another budget surplus.
We haven't chosen between cost of living relief or budget surpluses. We've been able to do both.
We have delivered back-to-back budget surpluses.
Order. And for those that are cheering on in the press gallery, they think that that is enough. Now, this is a little bit like the people who thought that Kamala Harris was a chance against Trump because the numbers that were coming out of Washington, well, they were getting better by the week and by the month. The reality, of course, is that while even if inflation, say, didn't go up at all in the next quarter, it has gone up by a significant amount since this government started. Now, they're going to say, well, it's started to come down. But remember, as we've said before, you add one quarter on top of the other quarter, on top of the other quarter, on top of the other quarter, and that's how you end up with eggs that end up costing 30% more than before this mob came to power. Well, this distraction, this excuse looks like it too is about to go up in smoke. The reality is that, as I have told you on budget nights during all of this government's term, the budget is in what is called a structural deficit. That, put simply, they keep adding so much spending to the overall commitments of the federal budget that you need to keep revenue going up by the same amount. But that may well not end up being the case. As you've heard a couple of times, and I want to add a little more to what Peter was explaining to you a bit earlier this evening about access economics. Now, generally speaking, give or take a few billion here or there, they're generally in the same spot as the government, or certainly they're in the right spot more often than not. They say over the next few years that there's a $27 billion difference between the budget where it sits now and the budget about where it's going to go. And that's not extra revenue. In fact, it is extra spending. And this, by the way, is what we should be talking about not over the next 5 to 10 years, but over the next 12 months. The estimates for this year's budget deficit, which Sharma said in May would be $28.3 billion, is more likely to be $33.5 billion. Why? Commodity prices are falling. Company tax collections, as well as inflation, is pushing up the overall cost of government services, meaning the revenue is starting to fall, but the expenses are not. And thankfully, the Financial Review made this even simpler for everyone to get our head around. Now, as you can see, the difference between the blue line, which is where the access economics people are modelling things, versus the red of the Treasury. Now, they say here that while we will be headed towards a budget deficit, Deloitte says it's going to be deeper than what the Treasury says. Now, remember, Treasury often gets it wrong. In fairness, they often undercount. But the suggestion here by Deloitte is that rather than undercounting, In some ways, they are overcounting the rosier picture that the government is trying to pick about its own financial circumstances. And after the next election, things get particularly bad. This is not because the amount of money coming into the government is not at record levels. In fact, if you have a look at the expectations for 2025, 26, 27 and 28, we hit record levels. Now, by the way, just have a look at Australia, 2022, at the change of government. The total government revenue was about $250 billion. They're now at $400 billion in the space of just a couple of years. Now, our population has not exploded, despite the best efforts of this government. However, fiddles and changes to the tax system mean that taxation revenue has increased. But look what has also increased. Back in 2022, $650 billion was how much the federal government was spending. The expectation here is that by 2028, it'll be $850 billion. That's what I refer to as the structural deficit. The spending is exponential in its growth. The revenue, while still heading up very quickly, is not matching the same rocket ship, which is why we get to the intergenerational report, which was released, I think, about a year ago. And this was the insight into Australia's true economic future. And it showed budget deficits every single year, all the way through the 2030s, the 2040s, the 2050s, and the worst budget deficits into our future are in the 2060s. The Australian population by 2060 is expected to be the best part of 40 million people. So the government will be doing a good job of trying to get more revenue because more people equals more taxes, despite the fact that more people equals more pressure on government services. And then you need even more people than that to pay for those government services when the people who are paying tax in 2060 start to retire. It's why Dick Smith refers to it as a Ponzi scheme.